Mozart wrote a letter, but the only statement I think he made, to my knowledge, about his own creative process, because he didn't quite know how to speak to it. But he said, it's when I've had a good meal, and in the pleasure of the moment, the ideas flow in torrents. And, you know, it's like it's a moment of being fully lucid, the fire of the imagination, the fullness of the soul. It occurs to me that in our own language, because we come so much from an industrial mindset, you know, our language has to do with drive, leverage. It has an intrusive quality to it that has a sense of effort and heaviness, you know. And so I was left, I think, in sort of in that moment of moving from our tone of our conversation to the piano, was kind of feeling just that quality of release and a longing, in a sense, to reconnect with that trust and faithfulness in the way life works, that we can be with how life will move us, and that if nothing's happening, it's maybe because we need to learn how to find strength in the waiting on life, not necessarily try to compensate by forcing something to move that isn't quite ready to go yet.
Are we prepared to be responsive to something that's happening that by definition in any relationship is bigger than just me? Okay, this other person is being moved another way. What does it take to become responsive to that larger thing, responsive to that collective movement? And I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have in relationships is that we are often resistant. Someone whose writing has helped me understand that is a fellow named Terry Warner. His whole notion is, actually, if we were willing to be more responsive, particularly to people, starting with seeing them as people, we'd be much more likely to feel a sense that we're at least moving in harmony with other people. And what would come out of that in our ability to do things together by being responsive to each other rather than resistant and trying to control each other. You know, and he talks about the work of Martin Buber, who looked at the difference between the I-it relationships, where we see others as objects, and the I-thou relationship, where we see others as people. And he said, there is a fundamental choice. And when you look at how that plays out practically, you know, maybe part of what that whole notion of taking a chance is about is, you know, at some level I have to take a chance on you as a person. I have to imagine that something's moving in you that can produce something marvelous that also isn't dependent on my ability to control you.
What comes to mind is, in responsiveness, is responsibility too. There's something probably unexpected and unanticipated about how something emerges through a chance encounter. But I also feel at the same time we need to be responsible to that chance encounter. That it's not a frivolous relationship, but in fact is a necessary way of being in the world by being responsible. I've been interested in working with a client around some stakeholder relationships. And the idea of being responsible to the stakeholder, we often, I think, assume the stakeholder is kind of responsible to us. You know, they're there kind of to help us kind of get our job done. The customer's there to kind of help us. You know, we do market surveys to learn what the customer thinks, to help us kind of do what we think we need to do. What would it mean if our responsibility was to the aliveness and the vitality and the health, vibrancy of the customer, and of our creative partners in the enterprise, and of our investors, and of the earth itself? That's a very different kind of way of looking at the ecology of our world in terms of what we're being responsible to. And it invites a kind of commitment, I think, to the other as other in relationship to ourselves. Management comes out of sort of an industrial economy mindset. And in that case, perhaps leadership comes more out of a knowledge economy mindset. But as we move into a living systems and more of an ecological mindset, perhaps we're looking more at stewardship than we are at leadership. And that the kind of themes we're exploring today may be more relevant to this emerging practice of being a good steward. That it has some marginal application, it has application to leadership too, but perhaps as we're beginning to move into more of a creative economy and more of a seeing systems as living systems. And I think the generation that you represent, Ryan, I think is going to come in with a whole set of different and potentially revolutionary expectations in terms of how people work together. They're going to have to fundamentally redefine how we think of what a leader might be.